All right, welcome back to Lindroth Hockey Podcast. It's a special day. It's a special episode. We're in partnership with Black and Gold Hockey Productions. Today, you're here with just the duo, father and son duo, Andrew and Jim Lindroth. Dad, how you doing?
Doing great, Andrew. So this is going to be about Andrew and I. We're going to be selfish today. This is episode 100. Also, this is just about almost to the day, our second anniversary of doing the podcast. So 2 years, 100 episodes, and a ton of guests.
Yes, and lots of cool stories we've heard. Very, very cool moments and other crazy things that we'll talk about today that has happened or things that we got to experience because of the podcast.
Correct. So we're going to talk about our journey today real fast. And we're going to get started. How did we start the podcast? How is it morphed into what it is? And many of you are actually now watching this on YouTube, that we're starting to do video per request of our listeners as well. So that's an added dimension. And for those on YouTube, you'll see that we're housed in my office at my university where I teach.
So this has always been the office that we talk about.
This is the office. So we add video. But let's talk, Andrew, about the podcast and where we've come from and where we're going.
Well, at first, the reason why we even came up with this whole idea to not make a super long story boring or, anything like that, but to make it short, I was kind of like a freelance sports writer for Black and Gold Productions, Black and Gold Hockey, and Black and Gold Podcasts. You check all those out, falls under that company, Mark Allred Jr. And so I did that for about 2 years. And, a couple months before I was done with writing for the company, we decided to do podcasts because they had a podcast network that started. Mark has always started his podcast. It's been going on for a long time, the Black and Gold podcast. So because of them, they gave us a platform and the idea. I was actually featured on one of the writers that was there at the time, Jack Gotzel. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Shout out Jack if he's listening to this. He had me on his podcast. I had such a good time and called Dad after and said, hey, we should start a podcast. We should talk Bruins. This is something that Mark has started on Black and Gold. And then we just started kind of talking Bruins hockey and stuff at first. And that's how it started.
Yeah, we started by Andrew wanted to do it. He approached me. And of course, Andrew had graduated college and he's still in town of where we are in actually Tahlequah, Oklahoma. We say we're from Tulsa. I actually live in the Tulsa area, but Tahlequah is about an hour east of Tulsa. And that's where Andrew is in my university. So Andrew was... owns his own company here in town. And we just decided this would be a great father and son thing to do. So I jumped on board, even though I didn't know what we were going to talk about. But yeah, we started talking about Bruin news.
Right.
And then I would have like some sort of old Bruins history, a Bruins history story or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And so if you check out, the first, I don't know what it is, 12, 13 episodes, that's kind of what it is a mixed match of that. Had no idea what we were doing. It's probably terrible. I haven't listened back to it. But you can still hear some cool stories that my dad dug up from history stuff for the Bruins. But today we are going to be talking about some other things. We do want to link up though, Dad. We always get asked, how did this podcast go from what you guys were talking about, just being a kind of Bruins news podcast, you guys have your own shtick, your own thing, and are having on guests. So Dad, how did that come about?
I don't really remember, Andrew. I think that we said, hey, it would be cool if we get some hockey players on our podcast and we interview them and have them talk about their story. And because we are here in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
right,
we go to the ECHL Tulsa Oiler games. And we said, hey, it would be great if we could get one of those players. And I think that's how we started.
Well, and I was about to say, I remember now, we had started this October of 2020, like very early October, so right at the 2-year mark. And I was, for Dad's birthday present that year, I was going to get a guest on. It was, I won't say the player's name because he ended up bailing, ignoring me. And
that's right. I remember
so
that.
I was like, sorry, Dad. But Dad ended up getting on a former Tulsa Oilers player. If you look at her guest history,
yeah,
Ian Kesrich was our first guest ever.
Episode number 13. And Ian had a great story of sort of retiring a second time. He has a great e-bug emergency backup goalie story where he had a resurgence,
right,
come back in his career. After not playing for a number of years, he was called up here in Tulsa as a emergency backup goalie, and then actually got back into shape and made the team and had a successful run. That's episode 13, if you want to check out
Yep.
Ian's story. So Ian was our first guest, and he was important because he helped give us a little bit of confidence that we could get players on. And he's such a nice guy. We've had him on at least another time. But he started to say, hey, guys, good luck with this thing if I can help you in any way. By the way, with the Christian Hockey Federation, I know some players, and he referred us to Bobby Robbins,
who's former Boston Bruin,
who we're going to talk about, and also Gary Steffes.
Right.
And then it just started to snowball from there, meaning, we would get contact information of these referrals, if we'll call them that. And then we had them on the show, and they refer others and others. And before you know it, you develop a good network of former hockey players, current hockey players. So that's how we started. And we found our little thing that we do by having hockey players.
Yep.
And then it morphed into coaches, assistant coaches, GMs, owners. I mean, you name it, have people on in the hockey world come on, regardless of what leagues that they play, and what countries that they may have played in, and share their love of hockey. And every one of our guests has a unique story.
Right.
That's what's the best thing about us, and has kept us going through episode 100.
And if you notice too, we do have kind of a thing, or I guess a routine with our guests where, we want to get their story. Like Dad said, we get anybody, as you can see, from minor league, pro, overseas, in America, coach, scout, for whatever. We want to hear their story and their connections too, because it's a small hockey community. As we've realized, you'll realize the same names that a lot of these players, coaches, scouts mention. So we just started to do our thing, and we won't give away our trade secrets, but we do our research. We try and contact guests through various outlets and do these things. And we've just been very lucky to do what we do. And the whole point is to highlight their career. It's about them, and just to hear the stories from a different perspective, and get a behind the scenes perspective.
And our guests, if you aren't familiar with or the variety of guests, I should say, we have on everybody, I think, who started playing in the NHL in 1966 with Gary Younger, all the way to current players, which everybody knows.
Right.
But we've had on just old vets, current players, you name it.
Well, today, we had some people message us. They had some things that they had ideas for a 100th episode thing. We've talked to some of our loyal listeners. Well, we've got a couple things to talk about. It's mostly reminiscing. A lot of them wanting to hear stories and things from previous guests, because we have so many new fans the past 2 or 3 months. We've actually almost really doubled our fan base. It's gotten kind of crazy. So, Dad, let's kind of shoot back and forth here. One of the first things we want to talk about is we're going to talk about guests we were most excited for to come on the show before that set interview or episode. So not, this is my favorite guest. This was, who were you most excited for before they came on when we got the news?
Gotcha.
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead.
Bobby Robbins, obviously. I remember his story, trying to crack the 2013 roster, and did.
And by the way, this is I have our episode numbers, so if anybody's interested, they can go back. So this is episode 15.
15. And just when we had a chance to get him on the show, it was kind of a dream come true for me. I looked up to him when I was younger, because he is actually the oldest rookie to ever be in the NHL. So it was just very cool to hear that same underdog story, 7-8 years later as an adult, on our podcast, talking to him.
Yeah, check it out, episode 15. Who else?
Another one, Mike McKee, who's Tulsa Oiler fan favorite, just because we've been watching the Oilers for years. And one year we went to like 20-30 games together, went to the playoffs. That's when they went to their conference finals. And so was just really cool to have him on. We were really excited to get Mike on. At least I was.
Yeah, I was too. He's a fan favorite, like you said, here in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And just a cool guy.
Dad, what about you? You got one?
Yeah, I mean, why don't you go through yours, because some of them might, overlap, and I don't want to steal your thunder.
So another one is, Dad, I don't know if you can look for this episode. I mentioned the name Doug Smith, the real life Doug Glatt from the movie Goon, for obvious reasons. But as we heard from previous stories. So listen to this real quick. Of course, we watched the movie. We love the true story behind it. And when we were researching his actual career and finding out what he actually did apart from the movie, we found out from a previous guest that I don't
Bobby
remember,
Robbins.
was it Bobby
It
Robbins?
was Bobby Robbins, I think.
And he had mentioned at one point the Bruins had hired this big badass
Fighting coach.
Boston police officer that was their fighting coach for Providence and the Bruins, but never mentioned his name. He even said, like, I don't remember this guy, but he was crazy. He was good. And we ended up stumbling on the fact, I think it was maybe when he said it on the show, or we found photos of it beforehand. I can't remember, but when we saw that, we got excited. We're like, this was the guy Bobby Robbins. He was the fight coach for the Bruins.
That's right. So Doug Smith is episode 33. And yeah, he goes through that whole story of the Bruins hiring him. And of course, his famous book, and like you said, the movies that have come out, Goon, right?
Right. Yep.
So yeah, Doug Smith. Who else was a favorite of yours?
Of course, everybody knows this is my favorite. Anybody would be excited. AJ Galante. If you've
Absolutely.
watched the true story, was it Crimes Untold on there? The Danbury Trashers
On Netflix.
He was awesome. This is the son, and of course, I don't really need to say much about it. Just go and listen to it. The crazy stories, the mafia connection stuff. What a blast! What a character.
Right. And what I would recommend, if you haven't seen it, I hope it's still on Netflix. That's what we found.
It is, yeah.
Crimes and
Yeah.
Punishment. Was that just the title?
Crimes and yeah.
Anyway, look for it. It's the Danbury Trashers, and AJ again was the
17-year-old
GM. And when you watch that, you'll love the movie documentary, and then go to episode 52, and we follow up with AJ, and boy, that was a fun interview.
Very, very fun. It happened in the early 2000s. I'm so surprised that you had never heard of that team, especially Danbury. I mean, that's near where you lived. So I'm just kind of.
Well, I wasn't living there in 2000, so I didn't.
Well, that's true. But just in general, surprised. But the last one that I had that was just specific was Fred Knipshear.
Yeah,
I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I just have a few signed cards by him, and he was an old school Bruin. I don't think he was a super mainstay on the Bruins team, if I remember correctly, but nonetheless, I was excited. And he has a unique last name. That's how I remembered him growing up too.
Right.
So those are my 5 I wrote down, Dad. You got any others to add?
Excuse me. Yeah. So I don't like playing this game because then I always will remember after I have make my list that I forgot about this person or that person. So I don't. Anyway, so Andrew's putting me on the spot. So a couple. Now, for me, these are going to be players that I grew up with, that I watched. So Brian Propp, which was big for us, and this was early on. This is episode 18, by the way, Brian Propp. And of course, he's a famous Philadelphia Flyer, and of course, he played with Minnesota and other teams as well. But he was mainly a Philadelphia Flyer. Of course, the great Shane Corson with Montreal, Toronto.
Yep.
I looked forward to him just because of the big bad Bruins of the 80s and the Montreal Canadian rivalry. He was knee deep in it. Theo Fleury was a great one for us. This is episode 60 for us. And we didn't think that we would catch him because he is still a big name, but you got him on the podcast. He was great, fantastic. And
listen,
and his stories about the NHL were great. So,
and this is a political-free episode. I know a lot of people aren't fans of him now, but I promise you, if you just focus on the hockey aspect of his career, it's an excellent episode. A lot of great stories from honestly, what should be a Hall of Famer.
Gary Younger, of course.
Yeah.
Who should be a Hall of Famer, by the way. So Gary Younger, he's famous St. Louis Blues, and then he jumped around a couple of teams like Atlanta, the old Atlanta Flames, Edmonton Oilers, things like that. So Gary's great, and I really look forward to having him on just because I grew up with hockey cards of this guy. Everybody knows Gary Younger.
Not to
and
mention,
of course, he's very famous here in Tulsa.
Yeah.
So check out it's episode 70. We had him on. We had him live, which was great.
Right.
He kind of comes to Tulsa often, and he has a huge whole. He was a coach here. I think he played here as well, but he was coach here. So it's episode 76 and 70. I think 8, I believe, was his part 2, and we did that live and in person, and it was just fantastic. I mean, this guy knows everybody, and We haven't hit him up for any references about, hey, but he did offer some huge names to us. But we were trying to be gracious and not be like, oh yeah, who do you know? Who can you call?
Right.
Can you give us their phone number?
Yeah.
He offered a few big names. We'll have to follow up with Gary. We got to have Gary back on.
Yeah, that'd be good too.
And of course, David Ling for me, just because at the time, when we did have David Ling, this is episode 24, so it was a long time ago.
Yep.
Former NHLer.
Yep.
AHLer. And I just thought he's just such a tough guy and a great character.
Right.
I was looking forward to having him come
And he
on.
played everywhere.
And I
love
know
players
that
like
there's others, but Andrew kind of forced me to pick like 5 off the top of my
Right.
head. So there you go.
So the next topic we're going to talk about again, somebody else had mentioned that they really want to hear this. Overall, our favorite guests and interviews now, Dad, looking back in hindsight. So now you can just think back what ended up being our favorite guests or interviews, not stories, Dad,
Okay.
because actually after that, we'll get to our favorite stories specifically. Okay. But this is just our favorite interviews or guests of all time. You want to start or you want me to start?
You start.
Okay, my first were a mix of two because, as Dad mentioned earlier, it kind of came as a package deal. Gary Steffes.
Yep.
And he referenced us to Garrett Gomez. I hope I'm saying that right.
Gomez, yeah.
First of all, Gary Steffes, very, very motivational person. Even if you're not a religious person or anything, he still has a lot of great things to say that'll impact your life positively. And it was just very admirable to listen to somebody that was just had such a positive outlook on life. Like I said, it gave us a connection to Garrett, and Garrett himself actually has a very inspirational story. Hopefully I'm not getting it wrong again. It's been a while, but he had gotten the news after sophomore year in college, he was unable to play hockey anymore due to an illness or something.
Garrett, you're talking about Garrett now.
Garrett, yeah, I'm talking about Garrett. He couldn't play anymore due to something, illness, injury, but was still able to at least student coach and continue to live his passion through hockey and ministry, work through FCA hockey, and just very positive guy. Came to terms with what his health was and couldn't play, but still was able to do something he loves. And it's very admirable.
Next guy, Andrew.
Darren Banks.
Yeah.
Hilarious guy with tons of stories. I'm going to get to something about him later as well. Some of the other topics we have, but his experience of fighting his way to the top to make it to the show, of course, him being a former Boston Bruin was a big deal. I didn't know about him before. Dad kind of remembered him from back in the day. He was pretty excited because he remembered him being pretty insane, just kind of a brawler on the ice. Another person I really, really enjoyed, I think his personality is wonderful, Shane Corson. I know people have
he's so entertaining.
Yes.
I don't know anybody that really hates on Shane, but I'm sure that there
are a lot of people.
There are. But what a great guy. Listen to that. So Darren Banks is episode 19.
Yep.
And then of course we had on Shane on episode 20. So it was back to back. So that was a great 2 weeks for us.
Yeah. And Shane just had some cool stuff. Next one, the last one that I had for this part, or I'm sorry, 2 more. Scott Birdie.
Head coach, Rapid City.
And so it was funny because this was the very first head coach of an actual pro team, an active pro head coach. I don't know if we had a former one before that we had on the show, but he warned us ahead of time that he'd be at the rink getting ready for a game that day, but just to roll with it. But we didn't expect the hilarious behind the scenes that we'd get the entire time. So real quick, it was funny because if we had premiered the videos for episodes, this would have been one of the funniest ones, but we'll have to post his to YouTube because it started out in his locker room office.
Right.
Then he ended up walking through, he's acting normal the whole time.
Walking
we don't
behind the
interrupt
scenes
anything.
Into the equipment room and then into the actual arena where he sat down.
Well, it's funny because you end up seeing at one point he's going by the locker room to get his players because they end up getting into the van. He's yelling at his players to shut up and turn the music down.
Right. So after the arena, he jumps into the bus with the players, driving back to the hotel.
You see all the players in the background and they're quiet, dead quiet, and you could just tell, like, don't talk, I'm on a podcast. We watch him get out, go to his hotel room, unload everything, come back out.
You are right. We'll have to
it was funny.
We'll have to post that to our newly formed YouTube channel.
Yeah. And I know one that both and I will have. This is my last one, Dad. Justin Hodgman.
Yeah.
We had him on twice. Very kind, humbling, motivational individual, played a huge part in the turning point of this podcast success as well. as far as opening up a new fan base for us.
Yes, over in the UK.
Yep, we followed him the entire season in the EIHL with Sheffield last season, and we did have him back at the show near the end of that season before his announcing his official retirement on the podcast too.
Right.
Which episodes was he on, Dad?
So he was on episode 39, and I didn't write down when we had him on the second time, so I don't
It was
know.
kind of recently though.
But yeah, Haji's a great guy. Absolutely. So again, I'm going to try not to overlap too much. I did have Hodgman as one of mine, of course, Bobby Robbins, and I had Gary Steffes as well. Of course, I have to mention, we'll be talking about him a lot. Our guest we have on all the time, Dave Capiano.
Yes, shout out Dave.
So we'll have, we can't miss Cappy. But here's one that's going to surprise you. Neil Eisenhut.
Oh, really?
And the reason why Neil pops up, so he's a former Vancouver Canuck.
Yep.
And he had a great Capuano story on there.
Oh, yes.
But the one thing that was great is when we're dealing with hockey players my age, 53, 55, whatever, early to mid 50s and on, it's always a challenge to get them to use a computer, Zoom. And I remember Eisenhut, who's a financial advisor,
right,
making big bucks as a financial stock guy. He was like, yeah, I'm not doing Zoom, but let's do it via phone. And we did. Remember, we sat here in my office.
Yes.
And we did this. And he was, it was so surprising to me that I expected sort of, he was being like, no, I'm not doing Zoom. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to do it by phone. He wasn't mean or nasty, but I was like, boy, this is going to be a challenging episode for us.
Right.
It wasn't. He had such great stories, and he's stuck in my mind, still does.
Wow.
Just cool stories, cool guy, because I expected this was going to be a rough episode for us when I was trying to book it.
Right.
Because he was just so kind of hard he didn't really, use that much technology. Old school guy.
Old men trying to text. You guys all know they put K and OK, and it's just like, yeah, it's terrible. So it is what it is. Right. That old guy thing.
Moving on.
So some of the next topic, this is our most requested one. Some of our favorite stories, specifically from our from special guests that we've had on the show.
All right, you want me to go first?
Please.
All right, because I have Andrew's written down, so I'll try not to.
But if you want to tell the first one too, right here, I think you might.
I'm going to go with the second one.
Okay.
So I think one of the most entertaining stories came from Rory, Rory Rollick, which I still think is one of the greatest hockey names in that we have. And episode, I think it was in the 80s, 84. So anyway, so Rory told us a story about his COVID experience. And at the time, he was in Beijing, China, coaching and doing whatever, running training camps for Chinese hockey players. And he literally gets stuck in Beijing and kind of forgotten about by the Chinese government, locked in his room, like showering with like a bag of cold water in a plastic bag, and he had to poke holes in, like just survival, like Naked and Afraid on the Discovery Channel stuff.
Yeah, it was bad.
And
he wouldn't even tell us all the whole story because it was just so dark.
It was, times. Him trying to get food. But the way he tells it is awesome. So check out episode 84 with Rory talking about that. And of course, he is in Thailand.
Yes, right now. Yep.
Currently. And the COVID kind of hit there. He got out of Beijing, went there, and it didn't get much better for him.
No, it did not.
So the poor guy's going through a rough batch, and he blew out his ACL or something, right?
Yeah, recently.
But anyway, episode 84, if Rory's listening, it was a great episode. Go back and listen on entertainment value, just off the charts.
Yeah.
Here's another one of mine that's that we're going to overlap. Of course, AJ Galante, the Danbury Trashers.
Yeah.
Just a whole everything.
Yeah.
And we won't go into it, but it's like you said, it's the mafia stuff to the head trainer T-Bone, right? With all the stories. So again, you'd have to watch the Netflix documentary on the Danbury Trashers, then listen to our episode because we're trying to follow up from that. But that's just all the stories that he told in there, from cash in bags of maybe They were in the locker room, giving bonuses to players,
My favorite is
driving the commissioner crazy. It
Yeah.
was just
my favorite is T-Bone just snorting cocaine before his 7, 8-year-old practices, and he's just smoking kids with body checks, and he's like, cocaine's one hell of a drug, baby. Apparently, he was truly an insane character in real life.
great story for me. Shane Corson
Yeah.
talking about his pregame brawl
Yep.
with Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Shane is episode early on for us, episode 20. And so he talks about how he started that pregame brawl in the playoffs.
Right.
I forget. I want to say it was 86, 87-ish. Anyway, also he told story about two embarrassing stories, one on him and one on one of his players he played with. The one on him was on the bench in Montreal early on. And he wasn't getting the ice time from Pat Burns, the head coach at the time of Montreal. So he was slamming doors. And the coach told him, you're done. Second period, right on the bench. Get off my bench. You're done. And Larry Robinson, the great Larry Robinson, captain at the time of the Canadiens, had to talk to Burns and say, give this kid another chance. And he did. And of course, Shane went on to have a wonderful career.
Yep.
And the story, I won't elaborate too much on this, but he told us a funny story about a goalie, and I don't remember his name, and I wouldn't even mention it, but a goalie at the NHL had a stomach ache and had diarrhea and pooped himself and had to leave the ice, and the coach was mad. The coach didn't care if he had pooped his pants or not. So it's a little potty humor there,
but it's hilarious.
A great story about
Great
how
story.
the poor goalie's like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom, guys, like now. And
Coach said, I don't care.
and coach wouldn't let him, and he kind of pooped his pants a little bit. And I guess in between periods, he did what he had to do to clean up. But that was a great story. So anyway, I don't want to take up any more. Andrew, a couple of stories from you.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite guests, crazy dude, but man, super entertaining. David Ling again.
Oh yeah.
This whole interview is another favorite of mine in general, but I wanted to save this for the story time section because we got a glimpse of how crazy playing pro hockey in Russia is.
Yes.
They get paid in all cash, right? That's
well, this was back in the day. I think it's changed a little bit.
Right. But his story, Dad, correct me if I'm wrong, please, because I could have mixed it up a little bit. But when he would get paid, they would normally get paid in sometimes just bags of cash, quite literally like the mafia,
Cash, right?
Bags of cash, and had to basically on their own, the team wouldn't help them. They had to hire their own gunmen to basically have them go either transport their cash safely to a bank, or most of the time they had to keep it in their house
or the GM.
And sometimes they would get robbed, or they'd have to be careful, and people would stalk them. But it was known for stuff like that to happen, and there'd be threats of gangs getting into gunfights while driving, trying to run them off the road and stuff because they knew they had the players, inside jobs.
Pretty crazy.
I heard it's insane, but it's funny because when you listen to David, he like laughs about it. It's like, for how tough that guy is. I wonder if he was scared at all, but maybe he wasn't.
The one thing great I remember about David Ling is I think he still plays in
something
in whatever like old 50-year-old league, but like for not like pickup hockey or beer league hockey. But he lives on Prince Edward Island, in Canada, and he was late for our episode. And it's guys, I'm going to be a little bit late. We're like, okay, you remember this? And he was like, yeah, I was helping my buddy on his lobster boat today, and we got in a little late. I mean, that's just, David Ling is just a tough guy, still a tough guy, and intimidating. He's the type of guy you look at him and you'd think he's a boxer. He just has that sort of MMA look to him.
Yeah, he does.
And but the nicest guy, and
check it out. Great stories. Terry Virtue was a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
And I never realized, because I'm younger, I don't know, I'm learning a lot of the history, especially for Bruins history, though, because he played such a role for Providence back in the day. But his name has gotten shared more than any other former player's names when it comes to how much respect, the best leader, one of the best players to play with. Terry Virtue's mentioned all the time. Honestly, the whole time I was kind of intimidated by him. He's a kind of intimidating guy, but he was incredibly nice, obviously, just a no-nonsense guy.
Episode 21.
Yeah.
And of course,
true legend.
I always think, when I think of Terry, I think of two things. I think of the AHL Providence Bruins championship one of the greatest, I think, AHL teams ever, in my opinion. And his stories about that championship run. And also it was at my home. Sometimes we have to do our podcast when we're not in my office here, and my home didn't have great internet.
Yeah.
So Terry was one of the first ones that we had to do it separately. You're at home, I'm at home. Of course, he's at his home. And I remember it was in his living room when he was doing our podcast, but my video was kind of going in and out, and it was very difficult to kind of communicate without Andrew and I stepping on each other. I mean, this is early episode 21 for us. We're still trying to figure out, don't talk over each other. And there was some internet lag. So I remember that. And I would love to have Terry on again, which we probably should.
Right.
Just because now we have our stuff together.
Right.
And I actually have fast internet at my house now. I live in a very rural area outside of Tulsa.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if we got a lot of these guys back on for second interview, it'd probably be even better now. So, but Dad, moving on now.
Yeah.
So we got some time left. Another one that I wanted to add in, because this is part of the experience and cool things that we get from this podcast. Guests that we met in person or became friends with because of it.
Yeah, I want to start with off the bat that hockey is the greatest sport, and hockey players and anybody in hockey, the hockey industry, are the greatest people. And I'm sure there's the knuckleheads and people that might just be bad people that are in hockey, but we haven't met them on the podcast.
No, really haven't.
And everybody has been willing to come back on our show.
Yep.
What help do you normally we get? Is there anything I can do for you guys? Please let me know. That's what we get from all of our guests. But you're right. There are guests that we've gone on to be friends with, met in person, and sort of, we have their phone numbers, and, they text us, we text them.
Right.
And it's sort of a cool, from a fan's perspective, this is great for us because we actually get professional hockey players or vets that are friends with us. So do you want to go through a list? Let's talk quickly about some of them.
I mean, just the first one, obviously, that we talk about all the time. And again, a huge shout out to Dave Capuano. I mean, he's our number one most featured guest. And it's just because it's so fun to talk to him. It's fun to get his no nonsense insight on hockey.
And he's got the Bostonian accent, which sometimes slips out of me.
He likes to get my dad shit, which is funny.
Yeah, and Dave and I text each other all the time, and I would call Dave a friend. We talk and text each other about many different things outside of hockey, whether it be investments or politics or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, that's been a great thing for me. How about this one, Jeremy Gates?
Yeah, that was one of the ones, fortunately, we've been able to meet in person. And he took the time to not only do the interview with us in general, but when we went to a Tulsa game, Dad hit him up, said, "Hey, we'll be coming to this game." And after Rapid City beat Tulsa, he came out of the locker room during the family skate time, and he came out and chatted with us for about 10 minutes, took some pictures, and he was a great guy.
Great guy. Episode 46.
And big thanks to Jeremy for hooking us up with.
And Jeremy is assistant coach at Rapid City. You didn't mention that.
Oh yeah, my bad.
So he's not a player anymore. He's assistant coach.
Right.
And he said, hey, we said, it'd be great if you can hook us up with another player or so forth. He's like, well, what about our coach, Scott Birdie? You got to get Birdie on. And of course, I think he was, when we talked to him on our podcast, the coach was walking back and forth.
Right.
And so he's like, let me ask him, Birdie, you want to go on? Oh yeah, Birdie said he'll come on, which we got Coach Burt on there later on, the head coach of Rapid City.
Yeah.
So next, Andrew, who else we got?
Of course, Ian Kesrich, another guy that we've been fortunate enough to meet in person, our second interview, whatever episode with that him. Is.
We did it live.
Took him out to a steakhouse and was able to record a little episode with him.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to run into Ian at a lot of Tulsa games and Tulsa events, and he has his hockey school that he runs here in Tulsa. And
did he hook us up with Gary Unger after that? Was that after that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Ian did hook us up with Gary.
Man, Ian's the GOAT right now, man. He's helped us out a lot. Great guy. Great guy.
Ian Kesrich.
Which, speaking of Gary Unger, He's basically a friend of me. You texted him the other day
Yeah, we were at a game here in Tulsa preseason,
for
Dallas
and
and
Phoenix.
I
Arizona,
sent
I should say
Gary
Phoenix.
a picture of his retired number
Right.
that's in the BOK Center here in Tulsa.
Yep.
And of course, he didn't know that we were there, and he didn't know I didn't know that he was there because I texted him not during the game but after the game, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I was there, blah blah blah." And of course, I played with Jim Neal, who's the GM of the Dallas Stars. He's like, "Yeah, I was hanging out in the locker room," So it's like, maybe I should have called Gary before. But anyway,
It's all right though. Another
Gary's
guy.
Gary's fantastic because Gary, he will text you, but he likes to call you.
Yeah.
I remember that. Most people, we're living in a world of we just want to text.
Old men. They don't know how to
But
text.
again, he's old school. So when I've got his contact information from Ian with Gary's approval first, yeah, Gary just called me. I remember I was getting my car serviced or something, and he just called me, and I was just like, Gary Unger. Because, for me, it's like, it would be like me hooking up with a Boston Bruins legend,
Right.
Which I'd love to get a Boston Bruin on our podcast. Anyway, next, Darren Banks, which he's not so friendly with me, but he's friendly with you, Andrew.
Right. Yeah. Last year for my birthday, I do a yearly thing now. I go to Vegas for my birthday and bring my close friends I lived with in college. We went up there and I basically hit him up. He works as like, I forgot what it was. He's like
he's a guy when you're spending a lot of money and you got a group coming into his casino hotel resort. He takes care of them, whether it be getting them on golfing events, taking them around town,
basically make sure you have a good time
games.
taken care of.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I messaged him and was like, "Hey, if you're around, I'd love to see you, have a drink with you. I'm here for my birthday." He always said, "Hey, if you guys are in Vegas, come down, see me." I hit him up and he took the time. He said, "Meet me at," I'm terrible right now. I should have wrote down, forgot which casino he wanted me to meet him at, but it was on Fremont Street, beautiful place. And I met him there at night. He was sitting there. First of all, dude is huge. There's a picture of us. I have never uploaded. I need to upload that this year for everybody to see. But I look tiny compared to him. Super nice guy. I even said hi to former Bruin Shane Knighty real quick. That was down there. There's a couple of other ESPN commentators. It's pretty cool.
And you hung up with him.
Yeah,
he bought you drinks. It was a great time.
I bought a Boston, or for my birthday, my friends bought me a Boston Bruins replica 2011 championship ring. And I wore it out that night because, when you're in Vegas, oh, hey, I'm a former player, right? You say that to people, right? You're dumb. Well, I tried to do it with Darren. He laughed and took my ring off me. And he goes, "Yeah, well, the guy behind you, Shane Knighty, he's like, he's got the real one." So that was pretty cool.
Did the guy have it on?
No, he didn't have it on. But that's when I said, "Hey," real quick. And the guy didn't have time to look at the ring, but he was giving me shit. Cool guy. Another one, though, my last one, Kevin Tansey. He's a pro player right now. I believe this season he's in Denmark. Played in the ECHL, I believe in the AHL as well. But we actually do business now together. I own and operate a medical marijuana dispensary here in Oklahoma, and he has a CBD company. So we're now starting to do business. I'm going to be getting his roll on, which also that was kind of our next thing. We're plugging previous guests. So yeah, Impactive CBD, Kevin Tansey.
Yeah, and specifically for athletes.
Yeah.
So you want to check that out. Yeah, and just some other because we want to throw some love towards some of our former guests that we did promote some of whatever their products or whatever. So remember, Brian Prop has the Gafog cigars. Really good stuff. He has them custom made, I think, from the Dominican Republic. Freddie Knipscher got a CBD company.
Yep, check out his CBD company as well.
And we're waiting because we're going to have Bobby Robbins back, but Bobby's been working on his autobiography, which is, again, the oldest rookie ever in the NHL with the Boston Bruins, big tough guy.
Yep.
And also his spiritual journey with him, finding Christ. And I can't wait to read this. I know he's been, last time I talked to him, he was writing that.
Right.
So we look forward to that as well. Let's talk about, and you'd mentioned it, the Justin Hodgman interview. So Hodgie, played a little bit in the NHL with Arizona, a lot AHL, and then he went over to the Sheffield Steelers, which you might have noticed we're having a lot of UKEIHL podcasts, players, coaches, news, breakdowns. So Justin, we'll call it Hodgie, Haji came on our podcast, was fantastic.
Right.
Came on a second time too. Anyway, he opened up a new chapter for the Lindroth Hockey Podcast because Sheffield Steeler fans jumped on board because he had shared our social media, the podcast, and just opened the doors for us with the UK hockey listeners, which we want to say, obviously, hello to our UK hockey listeners there. I think we might have more people that follow our podcast in the UK than we do Canada.
Oh, easily. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so big shout out to the UK fans. And if again, we follow and will continue to follow and have a lot of guests from the British Elite League.
Yes.
And if you're interested in that, or you're a UK listener, check out all of our episodes. We do some breakdowns of Belfast. We didn't do Fife.
Glasgow Clean.
Glasgow, and of course
Sheffield Steelers.
But shout out to all of our players: Sean Booton,
Yep.
Sullivan,
David
from
Ling,
Manchester.
Nottingham
Yeah, it was
Panthers,
great,
of
it was
course.
great.
And of course, just want to wrap it up real quick. We do have t-shirts. It's available on our website, lindrothhockeypodcast.com. We've got our link tree. We've got now, like Dad mentioned, YouTube channel. So now this is going to be recorded with our video, as well as we're going to continue just doing audio. So definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be uploading basically all of our old episodes, at least all the ones that we can get
On YouTube,
Are we going to be able to get all of them? Or are they erased after a certain amount of time, you said?
we have at least the audio. So we never intended to be on YouTube, just because we didn't think we would be able to have the time to post videos and have all these social media. So, but now obviously we've kind of changed our video setup, and we're going to get better at it. We just have our one microphone. We're going to try to have a better quality audio and video as we move forward, which we should now talk about where are we going here in the future. And for Andrew and I, we didn't even know if we would make it to year one, let alone year two and beyond. And it's we're on Instagram. We're not on Facebook, but I post mine out of my personal ones, and I try to share that with as many different groups that I find maybe interested in our podcast. But Twitters are a major thing, and now is a big shift to try and include video on YouTube.
Yep.
And it is taxing on us because this is just a hobby project that we do. And sometimes it's the problem is having all the guests and having the wonderful people follow us, subscribe to us. It's kind of put the heat on us to do even better.
Right.
But I think so our focus is, again, we don't focus just on all-star players or well-known players. We do have them on if you look at our podcast, but players from all over. And we're going to continue to bring you the hockey journeys of many different people, whether it be coaches, GMs, and we've had them all on. We've even had owners, right? The Oshawa Generals of the OHL we've had on, Rocco. Yeah. So we're going to continue to bring you hockey stories direct from the players and coaches themselves. We do have a couple coming up. We do have another PHF women's pro player, Tori.
Yep.
She'll be coming up in episode 101.
Don't forget also our previous episode 99, right before this, Matt Turcott, who was a former QMJHL assistant coach, kind of bouncing between the leagues, but is now head coach for the AAA, the midgets for them, for the Q. We also have Kevin Tansey, who I mentioned. He'll be coming on the show, and we'll be talking about his CBD company and things like that. It'll be a part 2 with him. And then I didn't want to mention the name because we're attempting to nail it on because it's been kind of hard to book with it because our timing hasn't been good. But Anthony Stella, who's St. John Sea Dogs, QMJHL, he's the assistant GM. So it'll be good to get him on, but we're going to be looking to book more guests.
Yeah.
In fact,
Kyle Rhodes, former Tulsa. I think he's in Wichita in the East Coast League. We're going to have him.
we're gonna have him on.
I just got to line things up. So lot of others. We're going to try to get some NHL players
Yep.
or former players on here as well. So a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been fun. We're excited and we appreciate all the new supporters reaching a 2-year milestone, father and son duo and podcast, be able to do this
Yep.
and to reach episode 100. So we hope everybody enjoyed it. Check out all those previous episodes and stories. Let us know which ones were your favorite ones. If you got a guest you think we should get on the show, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll try to include even more content when we can of covering, gosh, we cover so much.
A lot.
Definitely the East Coast, AHL, NHL, UK hockey.
Let us know.
So thank you for hanging in with us, guys. Episode 100. It's a big deal for us.
Yes, huge deal.
And we will see you in episode 101.
Thank you, guys.